Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 95 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is lamb chops marinated in red miso and Shio Koji. This preparation pairs the Indian flavors of lassi, a yogurt drink, and spinach with the Japanese flavors of miso and Shio Koji. The lamb balances these flavors to delicious effect. Koji is a type of friendly mold often used to ferment rice, which is then used to make sake, mirin, miso, and other things. Shio Koji is koji rice treated with salt. It makes a great marinade and is loaded with umami. It can also be used as a salt substitute. The ingredients list provides a source. This dish is not hard to make, but involves several steps and timing is important, so I've rated it as challenging. Techniques today are marinating, making a yogurt drink, seasoning, wilting spinach, processing, pureeing, adjusting seasoning, and keeping warm, grilling, and plating. So let's start cooking. Okay, let's talk about the ingredients for lesson 95. Of course, you're going to need lamb chops. Now, you can either buy those that have already been cut into chops, or you can do what I did and buy a rack of lamb. A rack usually has 6 to 8 ribs. You'll need to have, if you're doing what the description calls for, which is 8 lamb chops, you'll need to make sure that the rack you buy has enough ribs. This one actually had 9 bones, but the last 2 are kind of small, so I left them together. So I got 8 lamb chops here that are roughly the same size, the last 2 being a double bone. You'll also need to have some spinach, about 8 ounces of spinach that's been washed and spun dry. This says it's been triple washed. I'll wash it again. You'll need about 8 ounces of spinach. You'll also need to have about 1/4 cup of red miso, 1/4 cup of Shio Koji. Now there's a separate lesson on making Shio Koji. We're not going to make that during this lesson. It's in my Japanese Fave series, and you need to start ahead because it takes 10 days to 2 weeks to make Shio Koji. Then you'll need to have about 1/4 cup of sake and about 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. You'll need to have some kosher salt and some freshly peppermint for freshly ground black pepper. We'll also need to have some olive oil, and then you'll need to have some Greek yogurt. Now, the only Greek yogurt I find in the United States that I think has the thickness that I like for the dishes that I use it in is the Fage brand, F-A-G-E, okay? You can use either the 0% fat or the ones that have more fat. I use the 0%. I think it's perfectly good the way it is. People who think, oh, well, there's no fat in there, we need the fat. I don't agree. I think it's great the way it is. And we'll also need to have about 1 teaspoon of freshly ground cardamom. Now, you can buy cardamom that's already been ground, but you'll get more flavor out of it if you grind it yourself. I ground this today in a mortar and pestle. You could also do it in a spice grinder. But make sure it's very fine, powder. Get it like a powder, because it's going to go into a drink, and people are going to drink it. Okay, so you don't want it to be coarse, you don't want it to be granular. We need to have about 2 tablespoons of sugar and about 1 tablespoon of heavy cream. And then we'll need to have about 2 tablespoons of rose water. And there's sources for this in the description, but I've seen it in grocery stores recently. It's getting to be fairly easy to find. If you can't find rose water anywhere, use water. Okay, that is all the ingredients for lesson 95. We'll break now, come back, and I'll show you the equipment. Now, for the equipment for lesson 95, we're going to need a cutting board and chef's knife. We're going to need a salad spinner if you're going to wash your spinach again, which I'm going to do, so you can wash it and then spin it dry. You'll need to have either a mortar and pestle to grind up that cardamom, or you'll need a spice grinder. We'll need to have a medium-sized mixing bowl to mix the marinade and a wooden spoon. Then we'll need to have a setup for marinating the lamb chops. Now, you'll need to have a Ziploc bag. I'm going to use my Jokeri bag filler, which I think is great. I've already got the Ziploc in it. And then you'll need to either have a baking pan or a sizzle plate to hold that bag after you put the marinade in it, so the marinade doesn't run all over your refrigerator in case the bag leaks. Then you'll need to have a blender to make the lassi, and we'll need to have a skillet with a lid. And I'm going to use this Our Place skillet, which I got, recently got. It's non-stick, but It's not really as non-stick as some other pans, which I think is a good thing, okay? Also comes with this spoon built into the handle, and you can just take it off and then you can use it in there. Won't scratch it up. And then you'll need to have a food processor and a rubber spatula to get stuff out of the food processor, a bowl to hold the spinach puree after it's done, and some shot glasses to serve the lassi. Then you'll also need plates, one for everyone. I haven't picked those yet, we'll do that later. So that's all the equipment. We'll break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to mix the miso, the shio koji, and the sake so that we can marinate the lamb. Okay, so we're going to put our red miso into our mixing bowl, shio koji. As I said in the introduction, shio koji has a lot of flavor. It has a lot of it has a lot of umami, and it's a great marinade. Okay, but it takes a little bit of time to make it. It's easy to make; it just takes time. And then we'll add the sake, and then we'll stir that up. Okay, now we're going to marinate the lamb. All right, so I'm only doing 4, so I'm going to put my 4 lamb chops into the bag. If you were going to do 8, you'd need a larger bag, obviously. And you might need a larger pan to hold the bag afterwards, something larger than a sizzle plate. Forgot to put the marinade in before I took it off of the bag filler. Okay, now let's take our marinade and put that into the bag. Right, and we want to take it off of the bag filler and try to squeeze it around a bit so that the lamb chops get coated with the marinade. And then squeeze the air out of the bag, close it up, put it on your sizzle plate. Now you want to put this into the fridge to marinate for at least 12 hours. I'm going to do it overnight. By the time I cook, it's actually going to be closer to 24 hours. That's fine. Marinating longer is fine, but at least 12 hours into the fridge. Okay, now it's time to make the lassi. So what we're going to do is blend the yogurt, the cardamom, and the sugar. And so we already have the yogurt in the blender here. Adding the sugar. Now I'm adding the cardamom. And we're going to blend that. Now, we're going to be adding rose water to thin it. Why are we putting that in now? Because yogurts are all different consistencies. I think that the Faya yogurt has a great thick consistency to it, so we might need a little bit more of the rose water to thin it. But if you're using a much thinner yogurt, you won't need much to thin it, and in fact you may not need much at all. You might just be adding a little bit for flavor. Okay, so now let's blend this. Okay, let's check it out. Now it is nice and thick. I can see that it's nice and thick down in there, but that's too thick to drink, right? So we want to add some of the rose water to make it a drinkable consistency. So we're going to pour in a little bit of rose water as we're blending. Okay, let's check it. Oh, that looks like it has a nice, drinkable consistency. Now, how thick do we want it to be? We don't want it to be as thin as milk, and we don't want it to be as thick as the yogurt, obviously, that we started with. If you've ever had drinkable yogurts, we want it to be about like that. Good. Let's taste it. Oh, tastes very good. Now what we're going to do is plate this up so it's done and then chill it. All right, now we're going to plate up the lassi, and to do that, we're going to use our shot glass. We're going to have one for each one of the guests. So we're just going to pour the lassi into the shot glass. If it looks too thick at this point, put a little bit more liquid in there to loosen it up. But this has a nice drinking consistency. Now, do one of those for each one of your guests. So depending on how many guests you have, you're going to have to divide that up equally among the shot glasses. Then we're going to take these and we're going to chill them until we are ready to serve. Okay, so now it's time to sweat the garlic and do the spinach. I have the olive oil in the pan. It's about 1 to 2 tablespoons. I have it on a little bit below medium heat because I don't want to overcook the garlic too fast. We're going to put that garlic into the pan and we're going to let that cook until it just starts to take on a little color. So this is cold oil. We're starting with cold oil, so you know, it will not start to sizzle when you put it in the pan. It will take a little while for it to start to cook. Okay, the garlic is just starting to take on a little color. So now we're going to add the spinach and lightly salt and pepper. Stir it around a little bit. All right, now we're going to put the lid on it and we're going to let it wilt for about 30 to 60 seconds. We want the spinach to still be pretty bright green. Okay, it's been about 45 seconds. The spinach is nicely wilted and it is still bright green. We're going to take that off of the heat. You see how nice and bright green that is, okay? We're going to take that off the heat. Now we're going to process it. All right, I put the spinach into the food processor. We're going to puree that now. Okay, let's check it out. We have a nice puree. We're going to scrape some of it down the sides of the bowl to get it back into the center. Now we're going to just add a touch of cream. How much is a touch? I'm going to add like a tablespoon, 2 at the most. Okay, we just want to get a little bit of fat in there, let it whip up a little bit. It's going to add just a little bit of color. Okay. Let's check it out. Oh, we're getting a nice color, and it's not too thick, not too thin. Scraping it down the sides again, we're going to puree it just a little bit more. Make sure it's well mixed. Okay, now let's check this out. Now let's adjust the seasoning if it needs it. Let's taste it. Very good. I don't think it needs any more salt, any more pepper, or any more cream. Now we're going to keep this warm until we're ready to plate up. Okay, now it's time to get our lamb ready for cooking. And you should have already brought your lamb to room temperature. I didn't tell you that as a step, but we're at less than 95, so you have learned always bring your proteins to room temperature before you cook them. Now I'm doing, how many am I doing? I'm doing 4 tonight. And what we're going to do first is we're going to blot them of the excess marinade. All right, now we want to season the lamb. You might be wondering, how long did these marinate? Well over 24 hours, because I put them in the marinade yesterday afternoon, and it is now evening of the next day. So they were marinating well over 24 hours. But you know, as I said in the prior step, you want to marinate them at least 12 hours. If you marinate them longer, it only adds more flavor, may tenderize a bit more. And you know I like to pat it in. Okay, now time to grill our lamb. We're going to add some olive oil to the pan. We're using the same pan that we used to do the spinach. Why? Miso Puree. There was garlic in that pan. I'm going to add to that. So I'm putting the flame on about medium. I'm going to let that olive oil heat up till it's just getting whiffs of smoke. Then we're going to cook our lamb. All right, we're starting to get some whiffs of smoke from that olive oil. There's actually a little tiny piece of garlic in there too, which is browning. And we're going to put our lamb chops into the pan. And these will probably take about 3 minutes per side for medium rare. But, you know, it depends on your pan, it depends on your heat. I'm just going to keep a check on them, as you should. Okay, it's been about 2.5 minutes. Oh, look, looking beautiful. Okay, so we're going to turn them now. Go another 2.5 minutes the other side. So it's been about 1.5 minutes. I'm going to check them because they were looking so good. You know what? I think these are done. Okay. That took less time than I thought. It has to do with your heat, it has to do with how thick the pieces are cut. Okay, let's take them off, keep them warm until we're ready to plate, and let's turn off our heat. All right, now here's a little bonus thing. I'm deglazing this pan with some water. You could also use sake or white wine. This is not part of the lesson, but if you were making these lamb chops for a different time, different purpose, you could deglaze the pan and get the fond, mix the fond into whatever liquid you're deglazing with, reduce it till you've got just a couple of tablespoons left, and use that as a nice pan sauce. We're not doing that tonight. I'm just showing you what you could do, and I'm actually using this to clean the pan. Okay, time to plate. Now we're going to put a little dollop of the spinach puree onto each plate. Remember, this is a small plate. We're only serving one lamb chop per person, and a dollop of the puree. And then we're just going to place the rib. Let's kind of overlap the two. Okay, and there we have it. That is lesson 95. We have the lassi here on the side. That's lesson 95. Lamb chops marinated in red miso and shio koji, with a spinach puree and lassi on the side. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is pork chop sous vide with sweet potato mashers. If you're going to learn to cook like a pro, you have to be able to cook sous vide. It's being used in almost every high-end restaurant today, either as a primary part of the cooking or as a camera cut off for a moment there. It's being used either as the primary means of cooking or as a prep step. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.